Afternoon. Our panel is entitled Education as Prevention, Contesting the Norms, Realities, and Challenges of Human Trafficking. All of us are from Oklahoma State University. My name is Denny Bloom, and I'm an associate professor in Social Foundations, a program in the College of Education. And our three panelists are PhD students. We have a variety of programs represented here, and we also have one panelist who couldn't attend, but we're still going to read her paper. So to my left is Tanya Benoiton, and she is in the program of school administration, as well as Sean Kinder, who is in school administration as well, and Lynette Rock is in social foundations, and the one who is absent is Tamara Keene, and she's in professional education. So we're all going to present different aspects of the phenomenon of child sex trafficking, domestic child sex trafficking. So I'll go ahead and start, since I'm first on the program, with my presentation, evaluating a collaborative pedagogical model for promoting awareness of child sex trafficking in schools. I was fulfilling my usual role of faculty advisor for a film series on the campus of Oklahoma State University in 2010 when student officers selected a film to be screened to the community on child sex trafficking in Cambodia. We tried to locate a guest speaker. When students realized that our university had no students or staff from Cambodia, they contacted the Bureau of Narcotics in Oklahoma City and successfully persuaded an FBI officer to join us in Stillwater as our post-screening discussant. They asked him to compare what we viewed in the film with the reality of Oklahoma. Little did I know the transformative effect that this would have on me that day and today. After the film, he passed out a paper to each of the 60-plus attendees, each one with a different Oklahoma child's face. These children were found dead, typically battered or mutilated. They were sex trafficked, he said. In fact, he said every sting operation in the United States, an Oklahoma child is found. Oklahoma ranks in the top 10 states for reported child sex trafficking. Once initiated into sex trafficking, children have a 7-year lifespan. Sex trafficking is now the most profitable business, more so than drugs, as the body can be reused while drugs need to be replenished. They seek out the young, with the average age between 12 and 14 years of age, as they are developmentally naive and easier to socialize or brainwash to be unwaveringly loyal. When I asked where this was happening, he spoke about the internet, but to my surprise, he also said, the school is a key site for recruitment. As you have a high concentration of children in one place, peers recruit peers, and it can go easily undetected. Also, pimps pursue students in transit from home to school. It was after this screening that I thought, if this is happening in the schools, then it's my responsibility to take an active role. I was constantly in search of where I could apply my energy and advocacy, and in the meantime, moved from Stillwater to Tulsa. I joined a task force on child sex trafficking in the Tulsa community in 2015 as the only education professor. The task force had only been in existence a year. It included folks from law enforcement, the juvenile justice system, community services, and a local advocacy group called Unlock Freedom. Unlock Freedom is an NGO that had recently created and piloted curriculum to raise awareness in area schools with great success. The problem was they confronted me and asked me to solve was a labor shortage of personnel to go to the schools to do these presentations. Although child sex trafficking was not a topic that was the focus of my research at the time, the committee was willing to collaboratively teach the course with me. None of us knew exactly what that would mean at the time. I initiated a course that was for a combined undergraduate and graduate student population with a service learning component that included 3 weeks of training with the curriculum created by Unlock Freedom, with pairs of students conducting presentations in area schools that semester. 13 students enrolled in what came to be a graduate seminar. Law enforcement was able to quickly process background checks, and Unlock Freedom already had the school sites scheduled. The task force played a pivotal role in selecting the curriculum for the 15-week course. We collectively created the syllabus, and with the different stakeholders on the committee and their networks, we were able to schedule an expert guest speaker for every class meeting. This is the first time that the local task force collaborated with an academic institution and looked to a college of education, not a school of social work, to serve the community on this topic. This innovative community collaborative pedagogical model was evaluated to consider its transformative potential on the students and those receiving the school presentations. Data was collected from open-ended questionnaires at the beginning and end of the course. In addition, students' weekly reflections were analyzed, as well as reflections from the task force and pre- and post surveys from the school presentations. The findings show new awareness from all involved in the ways the university can become a major player with the community in preventing child sex trafficking locally, offering new possibilities for community education. Course materials included firsthand accounts written by domestic child sex traffic survivors, feminist theory regarding agency and oppression, domestic and international policies and legislation, and curriculum from Unlock Freedom. We visited the Juvenile Detention Center and had guest speakers from Girl Power, Youth Services, Domestic Violence Intervention Services, Law Enforcement, a special on residential homes for trafficked girls, a university counselor, and book authors via Skype. We learned about indications or warning signs and the sensitivity involved in approaching victims. We had sessions on internet safety and sexualization of children in the media. I was warned by a social work professor from another university that this course could be problematic as she had experienced teaching on this topic. She mentioned how discussion of the topic could unleash secondary trauma in the class, as 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys are victims of sexual abuse. I asked her how she had handled that. She said, "I had longer office hours." Knowing that I was ill-equipped for this, I invited the university counselor to come to my first class session to welcome and inform students about the services available on campus. The social work professor remarked, "With almost any class you teach, there's the potential to make jokes, but this one is heavy, and there isn't anything funny." I told her about the service learning component in my class to raise awareness in the schools. She was impressed and bid me well, knowing that this would allow students to be proactive and make a difference. Most importantly, students gained a critical perspective in the way the system works and doesn't work in the interest of our children. I will now share some of my students' comments. It was not surprising to read that African American girls had the highest percentage of being trafficked. They are also among those who live in high poverty areas and receive a less quality education. This also makes me wonder, if the highest percentage were white girls, would the funding and priority level of helping rescue and rehabilitate sex trafficking victims be raised considerably? Before I started our readings on treatment models, and certainly before I began this class, it never occurred to me that after you rescue a girl from being trafficked, that you would need to provide anything other than a safe place to stay and a bus ticket home. I suppose I was very naive, but I always assumed that any child that was being prostituted would be so grateful for being rescued that once they were taken away from the environment, they would be so grateful that they would drive off with their rescuers into the sunset, and the birds would sing, and then Spielberg would roll credits over the happily ever after. How can we make sure that girls receive everything that they need, but also make sure that they don't get lost in the system? That seems to be the most important task. Fascinating to me was the idea that agency can enter the sex trafficking debate in the identification of this phenomenon as a social practice. Also, the victim-agency dichotomy, although under much debate, is a good scholarly thought to add to my understanding for the picture I am forming of human trafficking, particularly the sex culture. The feminist concerns that incarceration rates for women are increasing and the crimes against women are a cause for fear start to fill in for me just how feminist theory can frame sex trafficking, the enforcement of related laws, and incarceration of the convicted. The juxtaposition of treatment models and the idea of power and agency seem to comport with another in the human trafficking victims, and in that the human trafficking victims lose much of their power and agency over their own body throughout the traumatic event. However, the elimination of personal embodied boundaries is what treatment facilities seek to rectify by working on the whole person to reconstitute mental mechanisms of choice that lead to empowerment. For me, the most valuable aspect of this course is that it has really pushed me to think from new perspectives and challenged me to question aspects of our world, literacy, discourse, gender issues on a deeper level, which I appreciate. I do not think that the penalties for violating these provisions are punitive enough, especially considering that the average yearly income of a pimp is $600,000. A year of incarceration makes minimal difference for a pimp, especially as he is able to control his victims from prison, and he is still earning this money, tax-free no less. How do they decide who gets charged with pandering and who gets charged with trafficking? How do they make that decision? And what obstacles do they overcome trying to get these young people who are brainwashed and afraid to testify against their traffickers? According to the readings in the speaker, the biggest difference between pandering and trafficking is that the prosecutors would have to prove extreme exploitation and denial of freedom. That seems to be a very subjective definition for a law, open to interpretation. Should our laws not be more precise in their language, leaving less room for subjectivity? In Oklahoma, safe harbor laws exist for youth 15 or under, but youth 16 and 17 years old may potentially be arrested for prostitution. I believe that Oklahoma needs to push for broader safe harbor laws. As we toured the juvenile detention center, I was able to wave to a few students I've had in classes over the past year. I saw a former student who I recently learned used to carry a gun with her in her purse during the school day. I was both glad to see this young woman doing so well where she is, sad to see that she has been there so long, and more than a little anxious to see her at all. I believe a more concerted effort is required to ignite a paradigm shift, placing accountability on adult men to take the lead, to being a leader, adult men with power to start prioritizing these issues. Conscientization was cultivated during critical dialogues in the classroom, in the readings, and through weekly reflections. Students experienced discomfort frequently, but they also formed a sense of community with the goal to broaden awareness in the schools. They all earned certificates of completion for their training and service and continue to communicate the message with others even after the course came to a close. Putting on this course was not easy. I ran into politics that attempted to impede it happening both last spring and this upcoming spring, but it will continue. It has gotten a lot of positive feedback. In addition, when creating a service learning course, trust issues always arise, and they did with this one too. I am the instructor of record, but at least half of the class meeting time was arranged with guest speakers by our task force. I had to let go and trust. I was uncertain as to how effective they would be. In addition, the CEO of Unlock Freedom was reluctant to have me guarantee students that if they went through the training and service, that they would receive certificates, because what if they did a horrible job? All of the stakeholders remarked at the end that the discussions went beyond what they expected in critical discourse and questioning. They were very impressed with my 13 graduate students. The guest speakers were fantastic, as were the curriculum presentations in schools. For me, I love the course because for the first time ever, I was part of a team of facilitators dedicated to the cause, who honed one another in creating the best class each week. I felt fueled and supported. And truly all of us, students and facilitators alike, in a very Freudian way, became a community of learners. I close with a student's comment. I find the information that I'm attaining and learning important in order to help prevent this issue from happening. But in retrospect, I find it disturbing as well. There are certain things and places that I will never view the same after taking this course and gaining this knowledge. Sadly, there's a part of me that is glad, and a small part of me that is remorseful as well. Prior to this course, I was completely naive to this topic, and now that I am aware of its presence, I am not comfortable ignoring it. Facing this issue and trying to reach out to all those children who could be affected by this and educating them are far more important than the discomfort I have on this topic. I suppose this is a prime example of doing what is right, and it's not always easy. So now we're going to, okay, thank you. So now we're going to move to Tanya Benoiton, and she'll introduce her presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Bloom. My presentation is titled, Educating School Personnel on Child Sex Trafficking. Skandrick, located in rural Oklahoma, serves about 200 students with 16 certified employees comprised of mostly middle-aged female teachers, with the majority of those teachers being veterans. On a warm spring afternoon in 2016, my colleague, Sean Kinder, and I nervously watched the teachers trickle into the middle school classroom. Most of them acknowledged our presence with a friendly hello, and all 12 of them seemed attentive despite the presentation being late in the day. As they settled in, some were subdued and others were more animated. This curriculum presentation was not just concerned with imparting new knowledge, but also considering what Paulo Freire calls praxis action that is informed and linked to certain values. We hoped that this curriculum presentation would not only initiate dialogue, but also new awareness, policy, and procedures. According to Freire, dialogue wasn't just about deepening understanding, but was part of making a difference in the world. Dialogue in itself is a cooperative activity involving respect. The process is important and can be seen as enhancing community and building social capital and leading us to act in ways that make for justice and human flourishing. With this hope of a type of conscientization outcome, the process of developing a critical awareness of one's social reality through reflection and action, I tried to make eye contact with the teachers as they walked into the room and handed them a handout. Principal Zandi thought our presentation would be a great professional development topic for their weekly after-school Power Chat meetings. Before I knew it, it was almost time to begin, and Mr. Zandi snuck in right before the video started. Unlike Sean, who was doing his internship at the school at the time, I was an outsider. I was the foreigner. I was the newbie turned trainer for the day. How receptive would these teachers and staff be for this training? What was their level of perception about child trafficking? What policies and procedures did Skandrick School have to deal with suspected victims of child trafficking? What transpired from this service learning experience of presenting this curriculum translated into an opportunity to conduct research about this issue at Skandrick School. We wanted to follow Paulo Freire's model of insisting on situating educational activity in the lived experience of participants. As we went through the presentation, some teachers pitched in their perspective, while others asked some clarifying questions. A few teachers had prior knowledge of the topic. I was taken by their interest in the topic and in the curriculum. I expected some resistance or disinterest, but was surprised by their willingness to listen to us. They were alarmed at the statistics we presented. As we neared the end of the presentation, I fully expected them to get up and leave after the designated hour. Instead, they remained in their seats. They wanted to know more. They were seeking more answers, more information. They were curious about the training Unlock Freedom could provide. Rather than strained silence, there was a lot of conversation. I was not expecting this kind of reaction from a socially and politically conservative group. They didn't scoff at us. Rather, they were very receptive. They had taken a pre-test survey before the presentation and used this opportunity to clarify any questions they had. The post-surveys revealed an increased awareness on child trafficking and an awareness of the identifiers of potential victims to child trafficking. We also invited several teachers and administrators to participate in one-on-one interviews. 3 teachers and the principal agreed to be interviewed. The staff realized that the schools were potential feeding grounds for predators and that there was an imminent need to educate on this issue, especially about internet safety. Not only are young people susceptible to the influence of social media, but they are frequently targeted by predators who prey upon the developmental vulnerability of children. Although conservative values may influence the presentation of this curriculum in schools, budgetary issues also play an important role in the professional development of school staff, need to be successful in dealing with this issue. Mrs. Reese, one of the teachers, reported, "If the kids don't know what's going on, a lot of them they're ignorant. They have no idea. They're promised the world and have no idea what's going to happen." Social myths must be dispelled. Learning is a critical process which depends upon uncovering real problems and actual needs. I was surprised when Mrs. Eason, another one of the teachers, calmly stated that they knew that one of their students were trafficked before she was placed in foster care because her foster mother shared that with me. It made me shudder to think that there could be a potential victim of child trafficking in this school. And she didn't stop there. She shared that she suspected that one of her male students has possibly been, simply because of some behavior and some things that he has said. As a direct witness to this tragedy, Mrs. Eason said that it's probably more common than we understand, and yet this topic never is addressed in any class. What is of more concern is that children can be victims, but children can also be actively recruiting for their predators within the school grounds. Educating children on human trafficking is the first step to prevention. Mrs. Reese noted that the allure of a different and better life and the misconstrued belief of being loved by someone are too attractive for an adolescent to pass on. Where they might see it as a positive future, but in reality, it's harmful. The risk is especially high, as she noted. Those who want definitely out of the lifestyle environment that they're raised in. As Mrs. Reese pointed out, these students are blinded by false hopes and promised opportunities, and they might not be pleasant opportunities, but it gets them out of this town and where they're stuck. The teachers concurred that educating school children about the dangers of human trafficking should be part of their school experience, especially because schools have been shown to be active recruitment sites. As Mrs. Elliott stated, the students have to be empowered. They have to know where to seek help, who to talk to, and to know that it's wrong. This instills a solid foundation for adolescents to make informed choices and also gives suspected victims the choice that they are often coerced into believing that they do not have. Principal Zandi agreed that ongoing training should be part of every school district's preventative measures, where discussion and dialogues about the signs and symptoms of what you're looking for and training the kids has to play a role. So while curriculum should be infused and constructed on this topic in formal educational settings in a fair way, we must construct dialogical and pedagogical context to provide a space to welcome children to discuss their lives. The curriculum presentation gave teachers and administrators new insights into student behaviors. Mrs. Elliott commented, "It's a sad reality. We've seen the fallout of it for years, and we just haven't realized that that was why we were having such trouble." She also expressed concern where human trafficking has made her more cautious, and it's made me more sympathetic to students, trying to understand why they may react a certain way or why they may be in the moods that they are in. While there was basic awareness on the issue of human trafficking, Principal Zandi stated, "The biggest thing is bring awareness to the topic that we don't typically deal with here, but at any point could deal with." Mr. Zandi stated that as educators, they are trying to be preventative by looking for kids that may be in that situation, identifying the warning signs so that we can address those issues as they come up. Similar thoughts were echoed by Mrs. Eason, who stated that the main goal is the safety of my students, physical safety, psychological safety. Yet we also noted that some of the staff may be in denial. Mr. Zandi contradicted himself as he stated, it hasn't hit Skendrick School District that I know. And then he immediately stated, "I know there are things going on outside our control. I know there's lots of molestation that leads to other things, but I don't think it's as big an issue here than in bigger cities where there's more opportunities." Zandi's commentary shows a break in the link between potential identifiers of abuse and the potential for trafficking, despite clear evidence showing otherwise. Ferry challenges each of us to question what he or she knows and realize that through dialogue, existing thoughts will change and new knowledge will be created. Safety was also a priority for all. Mrs. Elliott stated that if she did see warning signs of human trafficking in her students, her first duty is to report it to the proper authorities and to the school personnel. However, this duty is undermined by the limited perception on human trafficking. As Mrs. Rees correctly stated, that human trafficking used to be overseas, and now we see it a lot with especially bigger cities. She admitted that she didn't know a whole lot, just that kind of perception. "I now know that it's up until 18, because before I thought was all adults. But I guess after 18, you're free to make choices on your own." And this is concerning because, as Mrs. Rees stated, human trafficking is coming more and more into kids in the ages that we see every day that we were not aware of before. The covert nature of the crime makes it even more challenging to identify and assist potential victims. Hence, comprehensive training is recommended for professionals who are most likely to engage with potential victims, from social workers to doctors and other healthcare and law enforcement professionals, and even school personnel. Conscientization will necessitate the involvement of parents and professionals from all walks of life. We must all be vigilant. It is difficult to present evidence of trafficking unless a victim discloses, which is often not the case due to being brainwashed. As Mrs. Rees put it, I mean, you just can't have hearsay or speculation. You've got to be able to prove it. I mean, you report stuff, but it doesn't mean they're going to be taken care of. I could sense the frustration when she said, I mean, they can call the police, but again, it's still hearsay. You've got to have some hard evidence. Even Mrs. Elliott expressed similar hesitancy in reporting suspected cases. Because if I'm wrong, then I have made a false accusation against a parent or child, and I don't want to do that. Sean and I noted that for most of them, the only training they had received was what we had presented. After the presentation, Mrs. Elliott was able to list some identifiers on suspected victims of child trafficking, such as long sleeves and long pants in warm weather, which could be hiding bruises and/or needle marks. Or a withdrawn student, a student that has a knowledge of sex or even drugs that they shouldn't have at 12 years old. Yet Mrs. Reese was not aware of any programs or organizations related to child trafficking at the state, local, or national levels. She also commented that information is not out there for the public unless they research it and know. Her responses support the importance of extending more education on this topic to schools. Professional development should extend beyond curriculum development and classroom management to include these vital skills. Principal Zandi emphasized the importance of training. As educators, we want to be educated on what we're looking for so that we can identify it as soon as possible to get that child out of harm's way. Mrs. Reese echoed similar thoughts. Teachers need to be educated. The community needs to be educated on what's going on. The training we conducted is effective because education imparts knowledge, which in turn imparts praxis, which Mrs. Reese sees as crucial for educators, because once they can see it, if they can see something outside of here, then they know the steps to take to report it so that it doesn't continue happening. Being able to critically read the school context is imperative in taking steps towards protecting young people. This short curriculum presentation raised awareness. Principal Zandi remarked, "It was eye-opening for them, both as educators and in some cases parents. And we realized why these teachers would feel so strongly about such a challenging topic. Their personal connection with the school district took the issue beyond the classroom and into their homes too." Mrs. Gill commented that this new knowledge made her become more aware. But when I heard it on the news, I stopped to listen to what was going on. She admitted that she had become a lot wiser because before then, I really just wasn't aware, you know. We also got positive feedback on the presentation. Principal Zandi stated that it opened a lot of our teachers' eyes on what's going on, and that it's something they'll definitely continue to be in dialogue with one another. It also furthered conversations between school personnel on what we need to do to protect our students in that area. Mrs. Gill commented that if she was to get a position at another school that maybe was an older grade, she would definitely know what to look for. It was apparent that the school staff would carry this new knowledge wherever they worked. Extensive training will provide a better and deeper understanding and enhance the capacity to identify the symptoms and signs of a suspected victim of human trafficking. In addition, school professionals will be better prepared in assisting and guiding the suspected victim to access services and resources that will provide the security and protection they deserve. Empowering these survivors is essential to countering this pervasive crime. These skills can be a lifeline for potential victims of human trafficking. As Sean and I packed up our materials after the presentation, We recognize that our society places a lot of expectation and responsibility on our teachers. Teachers need adequate training and resources in order to identify and access services that will provide our children the protection they deserve, regardless of budgetary concerns. This research is also a call to action to all stakeholders in education. Oklahoma is a major supplier of underage victims involved in sex trafficking. Our geographical location in the Midwest and access to interstate highways make our state an at-risk environment. With the use of the internet and school sites for recruitment of minors into sex, there is a great need for education in the schools and with those who work with minors. Teachers care about their students, and we need to show that we are listening to them and care about the future generations. It is not enough for people to come together in dialogue in order to gain knowledge about their social reality. They must act together upon their environment in order to critically reflect upon their reality and so transform it through further action and critical reflection. Thank you.
We're going to proceed with our next presentation by Sean Kinder.
Thank you, Dr. Bloom. Thank you, Tanya. The impact of child trafficking, the impact of child trafficking awareness education in a rural pre-K through 8th public school context. It was a sunny day and the rays fell through the east office windows of Skandrick Middle School. In this climate of teacher shortages in Oklahoma, I asked Superintendent Willis about the hiring process, and the conversation took a startling turn when he spun around in his cushioned chair and spit a wad of tobacco in the trash can in defiance of the 24/7 smoke-free environment policy I had just drafted. He smirked. He proceeded to tell me how teacher shortages led to more flexibility in the hiring process. This led him to hire a teacher who was a registered sex offender. I swallowed. My eyes widened as he swished his teeth with his Pepsi, leaned back in his broken chair, and explained that he felt comfortable with this hire because it wouldn't be too hard to keep an eye on this teacher. In the isolated countryside, Skandrick, Oklahoma lies between a major turnpike and a highway, which brings commercial trucks and other traffic into the area. It is a small town in the heart of small, rural, and a poverty-stricken community with no stoplights and very little industry. The surrounding area is comprised of endless pastures that are utilized primarily for agricultural purposes, with oil and natural gas wells dotted throughout the area. Skandrick has one oil and water tank construction business that opens the town to a variety of trucking activity, which makes isolated rural towns a convenient location to allow child sex trafficking to go undetected. The youth and middle-aged adults loiter around the town's one mini-mart. The houses are tattered and falling down, if not already condemned or foreclosed. Those parents with employment have to travel outside of the area to work in jobs requiring little schooling. A handful of parents have jobs in the oil and gas arena and are farming families. The town has only one cop who is responsible for the community after the other was arrested for racketeering. This is problematic given the meth, marijuana, and alcohol substances that plague the town and the parents within the community. According to Perkins and Ruiz, children of parents who have substance addictions are more vulnerable to substance abuse or even becoming recruited into trafficking to escape their circumstances, such as parental neglect, abuse, or homelessness. Most of the limelight shines on major cities as the sites for human trafficking, casting a shadow on rural areas. In rural areas, as across the country, successful investigations and prosecutions against traffickers are rare. Yet, in 75% of the U.S. counties are rural. Geographical isolation contributes to a delay in intervention and the lack of local services. Small towns don't have public transportation, making it difficult for victims to remove themselves from the situation and find help. Victims are commonly too terrified of their captors, too embarrassed about their crimes they have been forced to commit, or too suspicious of law enforcement to cooperate with investigations. In rural areas, there is an added complication. Police and other frontline workers are simply not looking for the subtle signs of trafficking. When distance gets in the way, it becomes very difficult for victims to find shelter. Even if the victim runs, the trafficker will more than likely be able to locate him or her. Due to a lack of economic opportunities, rural communities tend to reflect people with lower income levels, and children may be expected to work to support the family, leading to an increased level of victimization of children. Additionally, truck stops are common in rural areas such as Skandrick, and these stops are all too often sites for trafficking and sexual exploitation. Social norms in rural communities tend to differ from those in urban areas in terms of lack of privacy and social customs. Perhaps the perpetrator is a neighbor or a relative. Oftentimes, trafficking situations can involve familiar faces in tight-knit, everybody knows each other communities. Due to the sparse population of small towns, cases may take longer to prosecute. An offender can still reside in the community after the case is reported. The victim's sense of reality of being unsafe is magnified. When reporting means having to name someone as the trafficker in a rural, close-knit community, the perpetrator frequently is released and charges dropped or charged with a lesser crime, leaving the victim and the community at risk. These precarious conditions lead to sexual behaviors that enhance vulnerabilities related to child trafficking. In a study looking at 40 females who were incarcerated in a female juvenile detention center located in a southern rural state, 34% of the participants reported trading sex by choice, and 31% traded sex due to coercion or threats. Trafficked children are typically threatened and brainwashed to not reveal their pimps or traffickers. They are taught to flee, and in most states, existing shelters do not provide more than a couple nights of relief, and they willingly seek the familiarity of the life they have been socialized into. This poses challenges that few child abuse situations do. As the school is one of the primary sites for recruiting children, it is important to prepare educational stakeholders to better understand how to identify key characteristic warning signs in association with child trafficking. Moreover, as a corollary, the method of reporting suspect behavior, according to school protocol and policy, is a function of raising awareness. I will provide an insider glimpse of how the administration views the issue of child trafficking while looking at the policy and security aspects and how they impact the school districts and its primary actors. In a time when social media plays a major role in society, safeguarding minors and students against predators is imperative, along with other online pitfalls. School cultures shape stakeholders' success, so equipping faculty and district with the skills to ensure student safety is not only necessary, but must become the norm in the global and American educational landscape. My colleague Tanya and I were able to use Unlock Freedom's curriculum platform to interview Scandrick Public School administration and teaching staff. As an aspiring school administrator, I undertook an internship at Scandrick Middle School where I interviewed Principal Zandy. As an intern, I had become very familiar with the district's stakeholders and the policies, as well as held a number of informal conversations with Principal Zandy and Superintendent Willis. Scandrick Public Schools is a pre-K through 8th district. The school's campus consists of one elementary, a pre-K through 4th building, and one middle school, a 5th through 8th building, that are positioned in between a fire station, a gymnasium, and a football field. The elementary and middle school are made up of approximately 200 students, 16 certified teachers, 2 administrators, with 1 principal and 1 superintendent for both buildings. The community has a 19% poverty rate, with 38% being single-parent families, while 77.5% of the children receiving free or reduced lunches. The school demographics reflect the community with 81% white, 13% Native American, 2% African American, 1% Hispanic American, and 1% multiracial. The percentage of special education students is 20.6%. According to Harris, culture reveals itself through the organization's values, core beliefs, and basic assumptions that all institutional and non-institutional stakeholders share. SPS is very much a product of the close-knit stakeholder relationships. To a large degree, many of the parent and community members grew up together, and everybody knows everyone's business. This lack of privacy is a key theme that makes it extremely difficult for those victims of child trafficking to confront their perpetrators in the public's eye, the police, or even their friends, family, or neighbors. Tightly woven communities like Scandrick often shame or shun victims, driving their stories and horrific experiences into the shadows, which sets a dangerous precedent for subsequent victims. To add to the insult, the victims must still confront and live among their perpetrators due to locations, relationships, and extended prosecutions. A critical aspect in the reporting and recovery process that is absolutely essential for victims to obtain is intervention and the necessary services that must be available and accessible. Due to several factors, such as the lack of financial resources and location, for instance, victims are forced to incur the cost and invest in time to find avenues of help outside of their towns. The lack of social support is compounded by the fact that local law enforcement feels the burden of not possessing the requisite resources to either gain enough information to lead to prosecution or even focus their attention on following up the cases of child trafficking that are reported. The fact remains that child trafficking in rural towns looks very different than in urban and suburban communities, which dictates that solutions in these communities must be specific to providing successful services and intervention. Aside from the oil and the water tanking company, the school system is the primary organization that sustains the community. Because Scandrick is viewed as an ideal district for a valuable education, there is a higher number of transfers and parents willing to transport their children into the district. Like many of the smaller school districts in the surrounding areas, sports becomes the focus of the community, which bonds stakeholders together. Therefore, as Kowalski explains, the power brokers, which represent the administration and the staff, are able to formulate and facilitate trustful relationships with informal power structures, which are the parents and the local community. The administrators have more influences as coaches in that they use this platform to disseminate information regarding the school's mission and vision while advocating for the school district overall. The district administrator's perception of child trafficking was unsettling in that they did not consider this to be an issue that currently impacted SPS. Rather, Skandrik's main concern was the level of funding and budgetary constraints that tended to create a vacuum of protected isolation. When asked how he viewed child trafficking, Principal Zandy said, "It is a problem that probably goes unnoticed, that not a lot of people know it's happening, but it's more prevalent than what a lot of people think it is." He then talked about his role and indicated, "As school personnel is watching situations, checking on child welfare, if we think there is an issue, we investigate further." With no specific policies to address child trafficking nor procedures for reporting, the administration suggested that there is an open door policy, meaning teachers and other staff can simply notify the front office and follow the hierarchy of authority when confronted with questionable behavior. Rural communities such as Skandrik give, without question, a high level of trust to the community stakeholders, counting on close-knit relationships to watch out for the community. Zandy explained, "Yeah, more or less, we're not everywhere all at once. So when you have the kids in our care, we're trying to be preventive by looking for kids that may be in that situation, identifying the warning signs so that we can address those issues as they come up." Hargreaves and Goodson explained that change over time fails primarily because administrators lack a focus on political, economic, and social contexts. Socially speaking, the level of trust the school officials show in their stakeholders removes them from recognizing that perpetrators and other activity related to child trafficking can come from within the district. This affects how they approach security for their students. Locking all of the doors, but the main entrance, is a valuable practice, but once inside the school, I was able to go virtually undetected through the main building. This leads to a situation where they are resistant to change because the system agents grow comfortable with their methods, not necessarily out of a sense of being recalcitrant. In summary, Skandrik Public School District provides the opportunity to observe how system actors, primarily administrators, approach the issue of child trafficking in their districts. The findings provide some understanding of how school officials perceive the potential for trafficking minors in Skandrik and what security and reporting procedures the district has in place to protect children. After the 1-hour training conducted by my colleague and I, the administrator was fairly noncommittal in providing more teacher training to the school or community on this issue. Additionally, I see a lack of adequate security measures that protect the physical building and academic environments, such as security cameras, resource officers, visitor badges, for example. Rather, this rural public school context relies heavily on community and internal stakeholder trust to act as security, which reflects the lack of a fundamental understanding of the sources and prevention of child trafficking. Just like most rural areas, the small town mentality establishes a fixed culture based on a tightly spun web of relationships, oftentimes becoming immutable to change or interrogation. The school district suffers from a lack of financial resources to help contribute to security measures that many of the larger school districts utilize. With a drastic downturn in the energy sector, Oklahoma is experiencing a statewide educational budgetary crisis that greatly affects the school's budget. Consequently, the administration becomes creative in a lot of what they do, opting to rely on the trust of its stakeholders to keep a watchful eye on the students and the environment rather than incorporating widely used security measures in their policy. Peter Ritt offers the notion that policy formation that captures input from actors in the organization evidences fruitful change. My recommendation to the Skandrick administration is twofold. Firstly, there must be a more concerted effort on creating policy that reflects crucial procedural steps for preventing and reporting child trafficking. Secondly, it would be perspicacious for the district to research valuable nonprofits like Unlock Freedom that can help educate about child trafficking as a cost-saving measure. It is critical that rural departments are trained in trafficking detection, investigation, and response. That service providers understand the unique needs of trafficking victims. That state laws provide victims immunity for crimes they were forced to commit while under the control of their traffickers. That we educate the public. Addressing human trafficking in rural America isn't just about waiting for the services in urban areas to expand into rural areas. It is not about replicating successful solutions from the city. Rural trafficking has its own unique characteristics, and the solutions aimed at addressing it must too.
Thank you, Sean. Tamara Keene was unable to be here, so I'm going to read her paper. Her name was Nicole. I was 22, and it was my second year of teaching, a challenging year for educators in California in 2009. I was told that my teaching assignment would be split between the main school site and the continuation school, which was for teenagers who had been expelled from their home sites. It was directly across the street from the main school site. Though it was a 5-minute walk away, the school seemed forbidding and eerie. I was genuinely frightened. I never expected that my experience at the continuation school that year, and moreover my encounter with Nicole, to be so deeply transformative and completely alter the trajectory of my teaching career. The students at the continuation school were 6th, 7th, and 8th graders who did not read, write, or function at grade level, though it became quickly apparent that these were the least of their concerns. These students came with thick cumulative files full of suspension paperwork, medical and psychological evaluations, pages and pages of records reflecting attempted parent contact, and a list of legal transgressions that ranged from curfew violations to arson and robbery. Some students came to class once or twice or a few days a week, often accompanied by a parole officer. Attendance and instruction were inconsistent. Content was basic and rarely taught in any chronological manner. And there were few academic assessments administered during the year. Despite the intense and challenging nature of the teaching assignment, I felt strangely comfortable and fulfilled. As I have done every year of my teaching career, I kept a daily journal of my experiences and emotion. In rereading my journal, I can vividly recall each young person I worked with and every painful moment when my heart felt heavy and broken working with such troubled, beautiful souls. I will always believe that each of these students came to my classroom tarnished by trauma and abuse, but with a hunger to be polished by compassion and love. I never blamed them for the way they behaved or responded, something I especially struggled with on days when I was cussed out or blatantly disobeyed. There was one particular student I worked with that year whose cumulative file, behavior, and life experiences shocked me to my very core and illuminated how truly unqualified I was to be working in this classroom. Nicole was strikingly beautiful and horrifyingly abused. And while she graciously shared her story with me over the months that I knew her, she never accepted support or advice in any capacity. Nicole was very fair-skinned with piercing blue eyes and waist-length curly chestnut hair. For a 13-year-old, she was quite physically developed and could have been mistaken for at least 18. I remember that she always carried a purse with cigarettes and chapstick sticking out of the front pocket. She smelled like cigarettes, too. Her clothing was tight and revealing, even during the cold winter months. Many of the young men in my class were often obviously distracted when she would get up out of her desk in class. She was strong-willed and very bright. Schoolwork was never challenging enough for her, even though she had multiple gaps in her education. I was always caught off guard at how elegantly she could articulate her opinion and ideas, and then at how quickly she wanted to disregard the rules and do things her own way. Nicole was intelligent, headstrong, and bursting with potential. I always felt like her thick discipline file did not fit her. Had she really committed all the recorded transgressions? Even more unfitting was her current situation, and the more I got to know her, the more perplexed I became. It took weeks of reflective writing assignments and one-on-one conversations before she shared her full story with me. She very calculatedly let it out in small pieces. Insignificant elements about her family members, recounts of teachers she disrespected, suspensions, and the time she was sent to a mental institution for attempted suicide. It was not until she missed 6 weeks of school and begrudgingly returned back to class with her parole officer that she finally shared the most alarming piece of her narrative. It was not just the details of this narrative that haunted me, but even more so the tone in which she communicated it. She was a victim of child sex trafficking. It was not until I learned about child sex trafficking in my graduate program during the spring semester of 2016 that I was able to understand and label her situation as such. As a frequent runaway, Nicole's pimp had recruited her to work with him, rewarding her with drugs, affection, and a sense of family. He bought her nice clothes and jewelry and even paid for her tattoos. He made her feel wanted and necessary to the success of his business. Time after time, over the course of a year and a half, Nicole would run away to the Bay Area, back to her pimp and her family of fellow trafficked children. She called her pimp daddy and the girls sister hoes in a very casual manner. Daddy loved her more than her real parents, and she felt safe and comfortable with him. He only prostituted her out to men so he had money to support her and the other girls, so he said. She was confident that he was well-intentioned and loving. I was disgusted at how nonchalantly she recounted these details. I asked questions. She coolly answered them. Nicole hated when she was picked up by the cops and brought back home. She swore that every single time she was brought back here, she would run away, back to Daddy. It was impressive how intricately she was able to craft plans to run away, especially since she relied solely on public transportation. The police and her parents did not understand that she was happier and safer with her pimp. Her trust and loyalty to him were unwavering. I did not know how to swim through the sea of brainwashing she had clearly been subjected to. Gang raped, up to 10 men a day, heroin withdrawals, pistol whipped, bloody, multiple abortions, sleeping with Daddy. The vocabulary she used during this narration made me feel sick to my stomach and foggy in my brain. I could hardly fathom these concepts, let alone appropriately respond to them. As she spoke, my eyes welled with tears, and I begged my tear ducts to hold them in so Nicole would not see my true reaction. But I vividly remember the moment my ducts gave way and what felt like ounces upon ounces of tears streamed down my face. Miss G, why are you sad for me? Don't be sad for me. I'm happier there. I want to be with Daddy. My life is better with him. It's so fucked up here. Don't cry for me, please. I remember how foolish I felt that she was comforting me in that moment. Her blue eyes penetrated mine, and where I expected to see deep pain and brokenness, I saw peace and content, which was even more disturbing. She was not mad at her victimization. She did not think she was being abused and manipulated. She was not worried about sexually transmitted diseases, drug addiction, pregnancy, physical mistreatment, breaking the laws, or even the possibility of death. I must have asked 100 questions, and she answered each question honestly and calmly. Nicole was in no way aware of how troubling her behavior and abuse were. There was no part of her that felt like a victim. My 22-year-old brain was confused, irate, devastated, and distraught. Obviously, her family and both the school and justice system already knew this information. I felt helpless, though it was clear Nicole did not want help. Even now, as I write this 7 years later, I have the same visceral response and physical illness I felt as Nicole told me this for the first time. In great detail, she shared about the sexual encounters she had and how proud she was of the amount of money she could earn for Daddy in one day. The sexual fantasies the older men shared with her and how she was able to get them off quickly. Words the men said to her, names they called her, ways in which they molested her young body. Her ability to detach the physical experience from an emotional response shook me almost as much as the nauseating specifics she had so intensely described. I hugged Nicole, beautiful, brilliant, articulate Nicole, who had the skills and the charisma to have a very successful life. Instead, her youth and innocence had been stolen, abundant potential afflicted with exploitation and abuse. That day and for days and nights to come for years after, I wonder if Nicole would survive this. 6 years later, in a course on child sex trafficking in schools at Oklahoma State University, I understand the process of how Nicole could say and defend her life the way she did. I understand the mechanisms of socialization that vulnerable young children are subjected to by male and female pimps who prey upon the youngest, most malleable aged children, knowing manipulation techniques that make most people's heads spin. Even more so, I understand a broken system where broken children get lost and often never found. In preparation for writing this, I did some research to see if I could locate Nicole. I contacted several people from the school district, scored social media, called law enforcement in both Woodland and Sacramento, and even some of the teachers who had known and cared for Nicole as I had. The last record anyone had of her was from 2013. I will never know what happened to Nicole. While I want to believe she was clever and headstrong enough to survive such horror, I also know that 40% of victims do not make it out. I am grateful to have worked with Nicole and humbled that she shared her life and her story with me. I have fond memories of her contagious laugh and brilliance. Once in class, a group of 7th grade boys were teasing her, attempting to get her attention, trying to prove that they were more thug than she was. Nicole got up out of her seat, collectedly walked towards them, leaned over and whispered something, then quietly walked back. They never bothered her again. To this day, I often think of her as larger than life. Teachers in the United States have victims of child sex trafficking sitting in their classrooms every day. They need to know the warning signs of potential victims: exhaustion, change in style or clothing, visible marks on the body, change in attitude or drop in grades, frequent tardies or absences, or new social circumstances. Educators need to be trained on the appropriate way to talk, to ask questions, to respond if a student discloses this kind of information, and who to contact. In our graduate class, we Skyped with the author and former sex trafficked teen, Teresa Flores, who went unidentified as a victim in her school. We asked, what could a teacher have said or done to get you to report your situation? She responded, to ask me how I was doing, not just once and accept my answer of being fine, but to ask daily and repeatedly, and in a way I knew you truly cared. That would have done it. It is imperative that we continue to ask students how they are doing and truly listen to their response. We as teachers may not be able to rescue victims like Nicole, but we can help recover them. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce Lynette Rock.
Finding shelter. He brought me the coolest gifts. He said I was beautiful and special. He was so respectful and mature. We didn't even kiss until after a month. I was only 13, but he was much older. One day I woke in a strange place with blood between my legs and felt sore. I had been a virgin until then, and I was horrified. What had happened? Was that drink that he gave me drugged? Then he showed me a video that was taken of us having sex. He said that if I didn't do work for him, he would show my parents, my friends, the pastor of our church, if I did not comply, and I couldn't let that happen. 20 sexual acts a day. I couldn't stop or rest until I'd filled my quota. 20 strangers who used and bruised my body until it was raw. I learned to disconnect. I became more disconnected from being Michelle. No was not an option. I was locked in the closet for 2 days with no food or water for being too tired to work. When I didn't respond to his text messages fast enough, he beat me. Some girls were kept in dog crates at his place. Being shot up with heroin each morning made it easier to please David, and I could tell that he was happier. I learned. He said that we could have a future together as soon as we've made enough money. I became David's favorite. He gave me a position of managing the other girls. I punished them like he used to punish me. One time, David was convicted of sex trafficking. They found me and asked me to testify. But I loved David. He was so proud of me. I told them, David has never hurt me. I like having sex with different men. David takes care of me. He's good to me. Due to the complex socialization a minor has experienced in the process of being recruited for sex trafficking, it is important to note that the rehabilitation needs of this population are different from individuals who are sexually abused. Not all facilities conceptualize the rehabilitation process in the same way, nor has an expedient path to understanding how to adequately address this multifaceted underlying issues that the girls experience has been discovered. By definition, minors are not considered mature enough to knowingly consent to any commercial sex act, and therefore are protected. Before 2000, in the Trafficking Violence Prevention Act, victims of sex trafficking were simply considered willing prostitutes and not given appropriate treatment after identification, and typically flee when returned to the life. Noteworthy is that once a minor is recruited into sex trafficking, the average lifespan is 7 years, and only 40% of the victims survive. The purpose of specialized shelters is to rehabilitate or normalize minor domestic victims of sex trafficking. Domestic minor sex trafficking is defined as the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act, with the stipulation that the victim is under the age of 18 and a citizen of the United States. According to the National Human Trafficking Resource Center, there is only one shelter in Oklahoma dedicated to sex trafficked girls, a gutted old bank building with 6 beds located in the southeastern part of the state, and the staff is not adequately trained. In 2016 alone, 49 cases of sex trafficking were reported in the state of Oklahoma, and a total of 4,176 in the United States. However, it is important to remember that this is one of the most underreported crimes. Those who work in the field use the term survivor instead of victim, simply to give the individuals caught up in this issue some of their power back. Home and residency is used rather than a shelter. There are a variety of approaches for both prevention and treatment after the fact to ensure that survivors are receiving appropriate care. Sex trafficking occurs in all 50 states, and no one state has sufficient treatment facilities. What steps are being taken to rehabilitate the victims of sex trafficking who are minors? To be normalized implies functioning in a manner that coincides with social and cultural expectations. Therefore, rehabilitation is the process that sets out to normalize one's behavior. The treatment process becomes a unit of analysis by which we can understand what it means to be human and be prepared for society. What do the facilities that tell us about our culture's perceptions of what is considered normal, healed, or rehabilitated? This preliminary study takes a look at how the structures, daily routines, and measures used to rehabilitate victims call into question who we are as humans. A Foucauldian lens is used to analyze both the socialization and conditioning that these survivors have experienced from the pimp and trafficker, in other words, what they have became, to gain insight on the prevalent treatment models used to rehabilitate them to normalcy. There are important disagreements concerning who should provide services to sex trafficking victims and the philosophy of the treatment underlying those shelters. Minors who have experienced sex trafficking rarely cooperate with their therapist. They have been socialized to only respond to their trafficker, the pimps, and the johns, which is why alternate therapies such as art therapy, equine or pet therapy, journaling, poetry or songwriting, yoga and physical activities, music therapy, and gardening can play a pivotal role in the trauma treatment. Treating the trauma associated with sex trafficking has the potential to cause secondary trauma, and therefore treatment models must tread lightly. When considering the treatment models, several different schools of thought emerge. Foucault's social theory regarding power and knowledge provide a lens to understand the socialization process of both the victims and certain treatment plans for rehabilitation. Residential treatment facilities may inadvertently dehumanize individuals who are on the road to recovery. For this reason, it is important to analyze the underlying theories of oppression and liberation to see. The pimps and the traffickers. Considering the complete control that traffickers or pimps have over these young girls is part of the solution to rehabilitation, in my opinion. While becoming controlled by their pimps, every act the young girl completes is rooted in the concept of pleasing her pimp. The pimp has all the power. They determine how many tricks each girl must complete each day. The girls are tracked via their cell phones using GPS, and often girls report on each other to their pimp. These young girls are beaten and loved on by their pimp, in turn, and experience both the punishment and the reward necessary to bend them to the pimp's will. The first dose of socialization these young girls experience after their family is at the hands of their pimp and must be overcome during the rehabilitation process. This is a type of discipline and punishment that normalized Michelle in the opening story to obey her pimp. Critical to the process is the age. The younger these children can be coaxed into this process, the easier it is to manipulate and maintain their hearts, minds, and bodies under control. As they enter safe facilities for their rehabilitation, we must stop and ask what is being created when we replace one repressive model, the pimp, with another. Transitions is a small home for troubled young girls nestled in the hills of rural northeastern Oklahoma. The buildings of the facility are worn with age, and the dormitory where the young girls live is a renovated family home. The location of the shelter is very remote, and this allows a buffer to surround the young ladies and makes it difficult for the girls to successfully flee the shelter. The second building on site is a combination of offices, dining facilities, schoolrooms, and chapel facilities, and is shared with Transition's sister site that houses troubled young men. Although male and female residents are in the building at the same time, mixing of the sexes rarely occurs, and they are expected to avert their eyes whenever they do meet. Transitions does not serve solely individuals that have been involved in sex trafficking, although they continue to have a few on its premises. One of its goals is to expand its facilities for this population only. It is run by a faith-based organization, which is very common for agencies working with this population. Interviews were conducted with the executive director, and analysis was completed on both the mission statement and the website of the shelter. Also, observations were completed at the site. Some of the treatment programs use a reward system. Comfort items such as a teddy bear or putting out a family picture must be earned according to Transitions. The staff who observe the young girl's actions decide if her attitude, actions, and behavior is proper enough to receive the sought-after items that acknowledge their humanness, their desire to cuddle with a stuffed toy or see a picture of their family. The residents are not sure when someone is watching and reporting. They become docile bodies as they become fully aware and responsive to the norms that are expected. The staff at Transitions facility enforce a very structured program. The process is much like the PIMPs in that the girls need to be broken of old habits and routinized into a new, tight regiment of behavior. Only those girls that fit into another's definition of what is proper receive full access to comfort items and the luxury of determining part of their own schedule. Foucault emphasized that discipline needed both reward and punishment, and this treatment plan contains both sides of that coin. Rewarding those who do well with an increased access to everyday items, while punishing those who disobey by restricting their movements and withholding goods. The number of girls living in the shelter greatly outnumbers the staff working at any one time. Therefore, the program relies not only individual adaptation to the program, but on self-reporting and peer reporting of rule violations. The girls become part of the power structure by conducting observation and reporting back to those in power. Educational experiences and therapy opportunities may help develop habits that were not emphasized in past for some of the victims. The girls at Transition are pushed to assume habits and schedules that they may have not had before entering the shelter. The girls are being asked to partake in their treatment plans and assume activities that will help them normalize to society's expectations. By completing their high school degrees, typically online, they are fitting into societal's ideals on accepted educational goals. The act of attending class, testing, and completing a degree regulates daily activities and adds benchmarks to their paths of recovery. Adhering to schedules and completing tasks are hallmarks of the docile body. However, it is not a given that all young people are ready to focus on their studies. Trauma can have a variety of effects. At Transitions, every aspect of the day is scheduled, and timetables are strictly enforced. Time is set aside for church service, education, therapy, and even relaxation. The classroom is a silent spot. Each girl works at her own computer, facing either a wall or the front of the room, with the teacher behind them monitoring every click of the mouse. Each girl is aware that they are being closely observed simply due to their distribution in the space. Some treatment models may use the religious doctrine to facilitate the recovery process. Transitions relies heavily on the power of God to restore these young ladies they help to a normal life. Their mission statement is sprinkled with references to both God and the healing powers associated with faith in Him. At 8 a.m. every day, the residents gather in the meeting hall to participate in a Bible-based service for 30 minutes. No exceptions. Transition strives to help its residents become all that God desires and states that the spiritual component forms the foundation of their therapeutic program. Transitions believes everything we do is wrapped up in the spiritual component, and therefore Christian normativity is strictly enforced. Our human instinct is one of belonging. Initially, the victim's previous socialization, albeit a traumatized one, makes them resistant to help or treatment. They have been torn from the only authority to whom they have been programmed to respond. Their instinct is to flee, and they are resistant to any other routine. The majority need to be detoxed as well. In those cases, a treatment plan grounded in discipline and punishment principles would not succeed. The individuals running the shelter control all the knowledge and therefore possess all the power in the situation. Girls that refuse to participate would be denying this underlying premise. The administrator at Transitions had no plan for a child that would not be regulated by the legalistic treatment plan they had in place. His shelter uses only one method of rehabilitation. Other facilities offer a variety of techniques, not relying on legalistic actions that withhold rewards as a type of punishment, but offering multiple ways to integrate into life there. Many shelters use the concept of loving them to death when working with rehabilitating sex trafficking victims. Shelters that love them to death simply offer a space for the victims to reset their existence. Girls are offered many options and not pushed into any situation that would cause additional trauma. In conclusion, the young girls that are traumatized by trafficking need all the help they can get reclaiming their power and their place in normal society. Although words only have the power we give them, making such simple changes seems to be a start in the recovery process. They are survivors because they have escaped that lifestyle and taken back part of their lost innocence. They don't live in a shelter like a stray dog, but are safe in homes with individuals that love them and will care for them. Somatic changes help shape the way we view people. As I conducted this investigation, I was impressed with the difference between recovery and restore. Restoration brings to mind the fixing of something broken, analogous to remodeling an old kitchen. When you are finished, everything is like new. Treatment of sex trafficking victims is presented as if they relearn how to exist in the world, in effect that they recover some of the innocence that was taken from them. Recovery brings to the mind the process of cleansing your body of drugs and alcohol. You never return to your previous state, but have to battle every day for recovery. So which is the end result for victims of trafficking? Do they become like new and don't suffer any ill effects of their experience? Or do they struggle daily with the past and the present? Our histories will always shape our identities. Many idealists hope for restoration. However, is recovery a more realistic approach? Restoring victims to survivor is the ideal situation, but is it realistic? We must be mindful about what one of our guest speakers shared in our class. Treatment models must be consistently better than the life these young women and men left behind. In addition, they need to be co-created with the survivor rather than prescribed by the organization. Thank you.
Do you all have any questions for the panel?
Not all at once.
Yes.
Ideally, putting them in somebody's home probably is not the best. Although one-on-one attention was great for the victims, they do need a lot of specialized care. And as sort of a disclaimer, I will admit that I'm on the board of directors for a 503c that's hoping to build a shelter in my hometown. So I have done extensive reading on treatment models. And small shelters are best, less than 10 beds, with a lot of individualized treatment so that they can get what they need in order to recover. And then no locks on the doors, the ability to come and go as they need, but with some structure so that they do relearn how to live.
Something I want to add to that is that it frequently happens either if they go into foster care, which is oftentimes what DHS does recommend, those families do not have the training to deal with someone. I mean, first of all, they need to be detoxed. They usually are addicted to some type of substance. And then also they have been socialized to flee. And those two items right there, there is rarely a family that knows how to deal with that and maintain the child in their, in their custody. And so that oftentimes doesn't work. Another situation that crops up with foster families, there are foster families that have used that as an opportunity to traffic the child. That's not every case, of course, but it does happen. So it leaves the victim, so many times people think if we can just get them out of this, then we can go on, as I read from one of my students' comments, and everything can be fine. But the process of recovery and treatment is a long road, and we don't have the facilities or staff to be a part of that experience for the recovery. So it just goes on. The situation is perpetuated until, as we all talked about, there's a 7-year lifespan on children, and it just is inevitable that they're going to die in one means or another. And so it's just very serious and complex, and I don't think any state has enough funding to take care of this situation.
And I will also add, when I was at Transitions and I was talking to their director, they have victims of sex trafficking and then just other troubled young girls in their facility. And he said one of the consequences that he had experienced was the trafficking victims had a greater knowledge of sexual activities than his other young ladies had. And that was one of the reasons he was trying to build a second shelter for just the trafficking victims, was because by mixing them in with other young ladies, he was teaching his other young ladies things that they didn't necessarily need to know, because the trafficking victims were so matter of fact about what their life was and what they'd experienced. They didn't see what he would call shame in their actions. To them, it was just their life. And so I do think to a certain extent, they need to be with like girls so that they can learn from each other and help each other through the process, so that they aren't shamed by what others would consider inappropriate behavior.
At that same shelter that she's speaking of, the director and also one of the young people that we met there at the time, she was 16, this was just this past year. She herself and the director concurred that this young woman had been there for 2 years now. And she said even at the end of the first year, she hadn't been able to make a turnaround quite yet. I mean, it just shows you that to the extent that this brainwashing or socialization has penetrated every part of them. So it's very challenging. Any other questions or comments? Do you all have anything to share? And I think one other thing to mention too is just the pornography industry. It works on both, it's part of the whole cycle. And the viewing of it is addictive, and the viewers will want incrementally more and more radical type of things. So inevitable that it would come to young children being of more interest. And then, of course, once part of the process of being recruited in this is there's usually incidences of the child being drugged and being videotaped in sex acts that end up, for extortion of some sort. So the proliferation of that and the access that one can have to it today so easily on the internet, it's just there's several pieces to the story. Well, thank you all for attending. Appreciate it.